Jersey last weekend.
Mind answering a few questions about the use and abuse of steroids?
We try to question the Gladiator called Wolf. He's here because he's a hero to millions of TV fans. We're here because he sets a bad example, taking steroids.
To youngsters who actually think you're something special, when you're not, are you?
Tonight, anabolic steroids, the new drug craze that's threatening teenage health and sometimes life.
You can go and get these drugs without any difficulty whatsoever.
Roger Cook, I'm here to talk to you about your steroid dealings.
You've turned my lad, a decent lad, into a murderer.
Yeah, it was us who were selling steroids to.
The drug pusher comes by bike. The drug deal goes down in a children's playground.
God.
The youth with his back to the camera is buying steroid injections. He's taking steroids to look fitter, bigger and better.
You want to look good about you want to feel good about yourself. If you're going out, all of you are going to feel good about yourself. You're all going to have a good laugh. And it's just purely cosmetic, really.
It's 22 quid.
Taking steroids can help put on muscle tissue. Taking steroids can also cause liver and heart damage.
I've got my needles in there and all.
Physical and sexual deformities, violent mood swings, and ultimately death. The pusher may be young, but he's part of a huge multi-million-pound illegal network, which is feeding and fueling a growing demand from teenagers.
It seems to be more the middle to late teenagers that are becoming involved in it. Partly because of the dance craze, a lot of the rave music, you take your shirts off, you expose your body while you're dancing, and so you need to have a good body, or they want to look smart and attractive when they're doing that.
Police concern is now shared by many, including the Sports Council.
Well, we're extremely concerned about the way that anabolic steroids, apparently in use by a lot of elite athletes, have now become almost a street drug, a regular drug for the young people to use to give them a better body image. Young males, they want to look better, so they take this drug, builds up their body as far as they see, without any apparent side effects, because they look so darn healthy. And that's a real difficulty for us. It's telling people that it's not as safe as it appears to be.
Shockingly, over 50% of those going to most needle exchanges these days are swapping needles used not for hard drugs, but for steroids.
I'm not scaremongering or sensationalising. You know? I've got them as young as 8 coming up and asking me about steroids, you know, and I want to look like the WWF, or I want to look like Wolf, you know, and I've heard, you know, if I use these steroids, you know, I'm going to be really big and I can beat my mates up at school.
Many ill-informed users believe steroids are a shortcut to a fabulous physique.
Well, basically, we go on holiday quite a lot, want to look well on the beach, want to look well, probably better than the average man when we're out in the pubs or clubs or whatever. And it's just a hobby, basically. I mean, builder by trade, so it's no competitions or anything like that.
Have you had blood taken before?
Yeah.
As a steroid user, Paul Dring has now decided to take the health warnings seriously. The blood test results will take a couple of days. He's hoping he's done no permanent damage, because he now knows that steroids can kill, as indeed they did recently in Glamorgan.
Here we have a case of a young man aged 20 years of age who's been trying to bulk up on anabolic steroids and is found dead in his bedroom as a result of an asthma attack brought on by the misuse of steroids.
All sports ban steroids, but it's an open secret that they're used widely in bodybuilding. Priscilla Choi is a natural bodybuilder and not a user, but as a researcher into steroids, she knows the dangers very well.
Well, the particular risks for young people taking these drugs are firstly physiological, in that they will have not finished growing and that by taking these drugs they may be stunting their growth. And also the risks from a psychological point of view are very dangerous, in that they increase aggression and hostility and possibly violent behaviour.
Violent behaviour has led to the formation of a support group for the families of steroid abusers. It was prompted by the bizarre behaviour of Sherry Lambert's ex-boyfriend.
He was just like a raging bull. Absolutely terrible fits of temper, psychotic behaviour, depression. He was just a maniac to live with.
She received letters from the families of children as young as 14. Why do they start taking steroids? What reason do they give you?
They've gone to a gymnasium. Their ideals are to become a gladiator look-alike. They soon learn, within the first few weeks of going into a gymnasium, that one of the easiest, simplest ways, if you can call it that, of becoming like a gladiator figure is to start taking steroids.
At the home of the Gladiators, the London Television Centre, the proposition that any of them took steroids would be a serious blow to the programme's clean-cut image. Tonight, we name those who've tarnished that image. Wolf, the best known of the Gladiators, claims to be proud of the show.
It's nice to see that, as a country, we're more fitness-orientated now as a result of Gladiators.
We first talked to him at the start of our investigation as he opened a gym.
I like your hat.
He insisted that he knew absolutely nothing about the use or abuse of steroids.
I'm not qualified to talk about that subject, so I never do. I don't know anything about it, so, you know, you should only talk about subjects you're qualified to talk about.
But one former gladiator, Hawk, admits that during the filming of Gladiators, he did take steroids, a habit acquired when he was building his body. Did you ever take steroids?
As a competitive athlete, yes. But in moderation.
To get there or to stay there?
To get there, yeah. But as I say, in athletics, I can understand why people have taken them, because I've been in that position and the pressures involved, especially when there's money involved as well. I believe the risk is warranted to a point. But with these kids, just to look good when they're out and so they can take their shirt off at a rave or what have you, no way. Just not worth the risk at all.
Flame, who doesn't use steroids, says that for some gladiators, they're part of the culture. So there's a certain amount of hypocrisy in here, isn't there?
Loads. I think that they say, oh, Gladiators are clean cut, it's a great show for kids. I think it is. It's showing, you know, people having fun doing fit work, but the Gladiators are superhuman and big. And
Flame, in real life, Kimbra Frazier, told us some sought chemical help.
I had one occasion where I did wander into a locker room and, you know, see something, and it was steroids. I checked it, and it was in a men's bag, and it was stuck there, and it was a steroid.
Steroids, as we found, are freely, though illegally, sold at gyms across Britain. In this case, in Ripley in Derbyshire, where the man in charge readily promoted them to the teenagers we sent in.
I told my young lads here, who've never been on it before, try tablets for a couple of courses. I had a young lad Thursday what's put £24 on in like 2 courses.
Ian Barker was just as quick to sell us the goods. The buyer isn't breaking the law because steroids, tablets or injections are classed as a medicine. The dealer is breaking the law, selling without a prescription. Mr. Barker, could you explain to me why it is you're selling prescription-only drugs? Steroids? Me? You just bought that lot, and one of our team members bought that lot a few days ago. The dealers are feeding and fueling the demand, and the warnings have gone largely unheeded so far.
I can't say it loud enough that the damage, the potential damage to your heart, to your liver, to your brain in terms of the psychological dependence on these drugs is extremely worrying, and you should be aware of that.
You've got a warrant to be here.
Don't have to have a warrant.
Well, I want you to go then, please.
It's not as if the steroid problem wasn't known about. One senior policewoman wrote a report on it 6 years ago.
I've not sold that. In fact, you can leave, actually, if I ring the police.
Please do.
All right, then.
Hey.
We must do something to make the public aware of what anabolic steroids will do to their bodies, to make young people aware that they are certainly putting their lives at risk because of the other side effects associated with the taking of anabolic steroids, and make perhaps government aware that unless we do something about restricting the movement of anabolic steroids, we can expect a continued rise in sexual and violent crime associated with that drug.
Steroid-induced anger, the so-called roid rage, recently cost little Samantha her life.
People don't realise how dangerous these steroids are. They have turned my son from a decent lad into a murderer. He has beaten to death a 2.5-year-old little girl, and I am devastated.
Brenton Byrne is now serving life for murder, and according to this expert witness, there's no doubt steroids were to blame.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. It may be amongst the first, but it certainly won't be the last. It's about time that the law enforcement agencies and the medical profession actually open their eyes to the damage that these drugs do cause to society.
The steroids that fired the rage that killed Samantha came from India. We wrote to the factory and asked who could supply us in Britain. A Porsche in a hotel car park. A mystery blonde and her bodybuilding partner. These were the people put in touch with us by the Indian firm. The man said he was a dealer and user, mostly by injection.
I have like calves, thighs, quads, shoulders, delts, chest, everything. Have you? I've done a lot, yeah. Because it gets to the point, like you've said yourself, scar tissue gets so heavy.
He sold us £2,500 worth of steroids and offered much, much more.
Not the amount you want to buy, there's always the amount. It's like if you said you wanted £250,000 worth, you know what I mean? If the money was there, you could have it. It's that simple. But it's, you've got to sell it.
They knew they were doing wrong and were nervous and suspicious.
Yeah, what's its name off tally?
I've been looking for bugs already, don't worry.
Yeah, you're all right.
So I checked his license.
And they were right without realising it.
What's the other bloke that goes round? What's his name?
Oh, God.
What's that bloke's name? What's his name?
Another one you mean? You mean you sit there and...
Coop.
Yeah.
Is this a Coop report?
He's not going to jump bounce on you.
We don't know who the mystery blonde is yet, but we do know who he is.
Gareth Mackay, Roger Cook. You were absolutely right.
Get away.
You were absolutely right. It was us who were selling.
Mackay simply abandoned his gym at Leek in Staffordshire and disappeared. Pushers like him never take responsibility for what they do. Zoe Warwick was a top-ranking bodybuilder who says she had to take steroids to stay on top. And look at her now.
Physically, I got bigger and I got leaner. I grew an Adam's apple. My voice dropped into my boots. Your genital areas grow. I stopped my periods. My breasts disappeared, you know. Mentally, it made me very confused, very aggressive, psychotic. You know, there is no emotion in you. You could kill if someone just stopped you getting to your potato because, you know, steroid hunger, you get very hungry and you blow at the littlest thing.
Like other steroid abusers, Zoe routinely took from 10 to 1,000 times the medical dose. Her heart, liver and immune system now irreparably damaged. She keeps the latent violence under control, but others may not.
There's probably somebody going through a court now on a charge of a violent behaviour, as we're speaking, who's been taking these drugs. And because everyone thinks they're the domain of the top-class athletes, nobody bothers.
One goes there.
A small boy collects his Gladiator stickers. His grandfather used to run a gym with his half-brother, Michael Van Wyck, who, under contract as the Gladiator Wolf, used steroids and dealt in them.
You just said you saw him selling to children.
I did, yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, he was due to go to Ibiza on holiday, and at that time, before he was famous, he called me over to the counter and he said, "Watch this." And my wife and I and my mother were standing there, and he called this young boy over and asked him if he wanted to look like him. And the boy said yes, and he said, "Well, I can sell you some steroids." And he sold it to him for £200. And my mother looked at him in disgust because of the boy's age.
You say you've seen your brother sell to 16-year-old kids and boast about it, enjoying doing it to get his holiday money. Yet he's on the record as saying he can't comment about steroids because he knows nothing about them.
Well, as I explained, he did actually sell them on to kids. He has sold them in the gym to everyone else. And the only reason he won't comment on it is he doesn't want to lose his job. And is there another one of Michael? Where is it then?
But Michael may. Sworn statements from people too frightened to be interviewed support and amplify what his brother says. An expert in sports medicine, Dr. Carl Clinton, says that you can definitely tell a steroid abuser from his physique.
Just leave it like that and it'll stick.
Generally, if you train excessively in the gym, you will reach a certain size, but to get the extra gains and the extra bulk, then you really need the abuse of anabolic steroids.
London Weekend Television said they took the Gladiators on their honour, only contractually requiring them not to use steroids whilst the show was in production. Sadly, some of the Gladiators seem to have let the side down.
Now, we were very interested when we were approached by the production team of the Gladiators about the possibility of testing. And we said to them, well, this is all very well, but why do you want to test? And of course, they want to test for public relations purposes. And we said, what are you going to do with the results of testing? And they said, well, we're not really sure. We said, are you prepared to act upon the results of testing in exactly the same way as the sporting world is? And they said, well, just a minute, we've got these people under contract. And of course, that is a dilemma. And then you have to ask yourself if they're playing by the same rules as sport is.
So they weren't prepared to take the ultimate step and ban any offenders.
They're not prepared to do that. They're not prepared to play by the rules and to act in respect of results.
The producers' attitude saddened the Sports Council, which feared that steroid abuse was a growing problem, and they were right to worry. The Cook Report has carried out the first ever national survey of steroid abuse by school children. Out of the 10,000 respondents, 6.5% of boys and 1% of girls admitted using steroids. Projected nationally, that's a possible 100,000 teenage abusers.
My reaction to the numbers that have been quoted from the survey is one of absolute despair. This confirms my very worst fears. No longer are anabolic steroids restricted to a small number of people, a selected sample of people who are elite athletes, who are professional sports people, but they are now a recreational drug, and they are now available to children of school age.
And from India, we've now got the paperwork naming the illegal importer of the steroids we'd bought in England.
My name's Roger Cook. I'm here to talk to you about your steroid dealings. You certainly do. These Indian government papers give you as the importer of a large... Yes, they do.
Yes, he is. But because the law doesn't classify steroids alongside the likes of heroin, it's difficult to prosecute.
Of a very large quantity.
Well, at the moment, you can get life imprisonment, up to life imprisonment for selling LSD and cocaine. If you're selling steroids, you're going to do more harm to people physically than selling either of them drugs. And I don't see any reason why dealers in steroids shouldn't get the same sentences, which is life.
And we have been buying this stuff that you brought in. You're responsible for this stuff. We bought this in schoolyards.
As it is, in a magistrate's court, Mr. Stiff would be fined £5,000 at most.
Doorways.
I don't know anything about that.
This has been implicated in all kinds of things, in deaths, in damage to people.
No.
It's been directly implicated in the murder of a little toddler.
Nothing about
Mr. Stiff is a bankrupt who nevertheless lives in a rather nice house. The business address on the paperwork turned out to be a derelict building in Liverpool.
According to all the documentation, the government documentation, the stuff that you import was implicated in the murder of a little toddler.
In Bombay, where the steroids are being legally made, they did know of Mr. Stiff, but didn't know he was selling their drugs illegally. Appalled by our evidence, the sales director agreed to cut off all supplies to Britain. One supply hopefully cut off, but many more remain from other countries. And there's still the problem of persuading youngsters that steroids are very bad news.
Right. Actually, yes and no. Muscle cannot turn to fat.
Those fighting steroid abuse have now taken the battle to the classroom.
They're two very different tissues, right?
How long will it take for some steroids to work on a person?
Well, you remember what I was saying earlier? That's why when you
People, he said, who were sacrificing life for looks.
It's pretty obvious that they're using something artificial,
Yeah.
Graham Madison is another pretty obvious example.
I've used them, yes.
But you know what you're doing. You've got a degree in chemistry.
Yeah. When you're an adult, you can make a conscious decision whether or not you do or you don't. When you're a youngster, you're led by, you know, different reasons. They don't know enough about them. They don't know what to do to them. They don't know how to use them correctly. You know, but when you're an adult, you make a decision, yes or no.
He was married to a gladiator, Panther, and says he knows there are double standards. Since the show appeals largely to kids, would you be happier if they could truthfully say it was entirely drug-free?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it couldn't.
Why not?
Well, because I know Helen's used steroids. I don't know what she's used when she's been on the show since we split. But certainly Helen, to stand up and deny knowledge of them or use of them is wrong. Helen would take tablets orally and also inject.
And you saw her do this?
Yeah, yes. I would administer the injections and Helen would take the tablets.
Panther's use of steroids is confirmed by another former gladiator who used to compete against her without steroids.
She got 5th place at one competition, Miss Great Britain, 1 year, and then she came back the year later taking the title, and her body had changed dramatically. She'd gone from being very soft to hard and very muscular, and I believe that she couldn't have achieved that without the use of steroids.
But did she tell you?
Yes. She actually admitted to me while we were filming Gladiators that she had taken steroids.
And what's your view of people who do that, project one thing? I mean, you're a mum, you've got a young lad. What's your view of people who project one thing and then do another?
Oh, they're pathetic.
For Paul Dring, the moment of truth.
What I'd like to do is to give you those results today.
He's been taking steroids for cosmetic reasons for several months and now awaits the doctor's verdict.
As you can see here, Paul...
The tests show he's already damaged his body. LWT agreed to ask the Sports Council for immediate tests when we put allegations about some gladiators to them, and they promised to publish the results. Paul is getting his results now.
I think that the take-home message has got to be that you've got to stop taking anabolic steroids. If you do now, then these results will be reversible and there should not be any long-term effects to your health.
Yeah. I'm going to take the doctor's advice and call it today and realise now they've been doing me quite a bit of damage, so I think that's it.
2 weeks have passed since we approached LWT. 2 weeks in which experts say steroids could be purged from the body, and no tests have yet been carried out. Jersey this weekend. The zoo, unaware of any steroid connection, invited Wolf and Panther to help open a new enclosure. We went along too, to inquire first about Panther's steroid abuse. She referred us to her solicitor. She was unusually camera shy, and so was Wolf, whom we'd already met at the airport.
Mr. Verwick. Very nice, but now you...
Please, sorry.
Would you mind answering a few questions about the use and abuse of steroids? We have sworn statements that you deal in steroids. That's a pretty pathetic example, isn't it, for the children who watch? The Sports Council confirmed this afternoon that LWT has asked for proper tests. And Wolf and Panther have admitted to LWT that they have used steroids.
There is no answer, is there? Because you're dealing in illegal steroids and setting an appalling example to youngsters who actually think you're something special. When you're not, are you?
Later that afternoon on local TV, Wolf demonstrated that he's either an amnesiac or a liar. He was asked about our meeting at the airport.
No.
I didn't see anybody there, did you?
I didn't. Just the people that met us from the zoo.
Just got a taxi and came here.
At the end of the day, whether they're pushing or using, it's the teenagers who are being exploited, and it's the public which is being put at risk.
Done.
Right, mate.
Got your stuff here.
If nothing is done, I promise you that within the next 15 years, we will see an explosion of crime, very violent crime, which will be out of all proportion to what we've seen before, as it is in the States as I speak, and that more people will have been injured and murdered because nobody took any notice.